The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 17 kilometers of polished neutronium, its crystalline walls reaching heights that disappeared into artificial clouds. Representatives from 437 species filled the tiered seating, their forms ranging from the elegant ethereals with their translucent wings to the massive, rock-like chronar delegates who required specialized seating platforms. At the center of this vast space stood the Judgment Circle, where today's proceedings would determine the fate of a species that had barely crawled from their homeworld's gravity well. The humans had requested membership in the Galactic Council after only 2 centuries of space travel, a laughably short time by most civilized standards. Ambassador Zexthara of the Vorthan Empire adjusted her ceremonial robes as she prepared to address the assembly. Her species had ruled stellar empires when most others were still discovering fire, and she felt a familiar mixture of amusement and disdain as she observed the human delegation across the chamber. 3 humans sat in the petitioners section, looking almost comically small among the towering aliens around them. Their leader, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez, wore a simple blue uniform that seemed primitive compared to the elaborate garments of other delegates. Beside her sat a younger man in military dress and an elderly scientist whose weathered hands spoke of decades spent in laboratories. "Esteemed members of the Council," Zexthara began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. "Today we consider the application of the species that calls itself humanity for membership in our ancient and distinguished assembly. I must confess, their request has provided considerable entertainment during our preliminary reviews." A ripple of laughter echoed from several sections. The crystalline hegemony's representative made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, while the Aquatic Federation's delegates produced their species' equivalent of chuckling, a series of harmonic bubbles. "Let us examine the facts," Zexthara continued, pulling up a holographic display that showed Earth and its surrounding space. "These humans have existed as a technological species for mere centuries. They have colonized exactly 17 worlds, all within their own star system or its immediate neighbors. Their fastest ships require months to travel distances that our vessels cross in days." The display shifted to show human technology specifications. "Their weapons operate on chemical propulsion and nuclear fusion, technologies we abandoned millennia ago. Their computers process information at rates that would be considered primitive by the standards of a child's toy in most of our civilizations." More laughter filled the hall. Counselor Threnx of the Hive Collective leaned forward in his specialized biopod. "Perhaps most amusing is their social structure," he added, his psychic voice reaching every mind in the chamber. "They remain divided into competing nation-states on their homeworld. Even their space colonies operate under different governmental systems. How can beings who cannot achieve unity among themselves presume to contribute to our galactic community?" Dr. Vasquez remained seated, her expression calm despite the mockery surrounding her. The military officer beside her, General Marcus Chen, kept his posture rigid and professional. The elderly scientist, Dr. James Morrison, simply observed the proceedings with the patient attention of someone accustomed to waiting for data. "Furthermore," Zexthara continued, "humanity has no unique gifts to offer our alliance. The ethereals provide unmatched artistic vision and aesthetic beauty. The chronar offer engineering capabilities that reshape worlds. The Vorthan Empire contributes military might and strategic thinking accumulated over 50,000 years of stellar warfare. The hegemony shares crystalline technologies that manipulate matter at the quantum level." She gestured dismissively toward the human delegation. "What do these newcomers bring? They are not the strongest, fastest, most intelligent, or most technologically advanced species we have encountered. Their lifespans are brief, their bodies fragile, their minds limited by biological neural networks. They possess no remarkable abilities, no revolutionary technologies, no resources we cannot obtain elsewhere." The Aquatic Federation's prime speaker rose from her specialized tank. "Indeed, humans appear to be among the most ordinary species ever to request council membership. In every measurable category, physical capability, technological advancement, psychic potential, longevity, adaptability, they rank in the lower percentiles compared to established council races." "Perhaps," suggested Counselor Virane of the Shadow Syndicate, his form barely visible even on the chamber's main display, "we should establish minimum standards for membership applications." Surely some basic thresholds of capability or achievement should be required before a species may even request our consideration. The suggestion prompted enthusiastic agreement from multiple sections. Representative after representative stood to voice similar sentiments, each adding their own observations about humanity's apparent mediocrity. Their military history consists primarily of conflicts among themselves, noted War Chief Gorgon of the Siege clans. They have never faced a true galactic threat or demonstrated capability against interstellar opponents. Their scientific achievements, while admirable for their timeframe, represent rediscoveries of principles we have long taken for granted, added Scholar Prime Nethes of the Academic Consortium. Most telling, said Zexthara, building toward her conclusion, is their silence in the face of our observations. They offer no defense, no compelling argument for their worthiness. They simply sit there as if expecting us to ignore their obvious limitations. She turned to address Dr. Vasquez directly. Human representative, you have heard our assessment. Your species appears to offer nothing unique or valuable to the Galactic Council. Your technological capabilities lag centuries behind our standards. Your military experience consists entirely of internal conflicts. Your scientific knowledge represents only the most basic understanding of universal principles. Your social development remains fragmented and primitive. The chamber fell quiet as all attention focused on the human delegation. Dr. Vasquez rose slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She walked to the center of the judgment circle, where speakers traditionally delivered their final arguments. Honored counselors, she began, her voice carrying without amplification despite the vast space. You have accurately described humanity's current capabilities in most technical categories. We do not dispute your assessments of our military experience, our scientific knowledge, or our technological development level. She paused, looking around the chamber with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the proceedings. You have asked what unique gift humanity brings to the Galactic Council. That is a fair question, and one that deserves a proper demonstration rather than mere words. General Chen touched a small device on his uniform collar. Dr. Morrison activated a handheld tablet. Dr. Vasquez simply stood in the center of the circle, waiting. The gift we offer, she continued, is something that apparently none of your species possess, despite your technological advancement, your military might, your vast knowledge, and your long experience among the stars. The chamber waited in expectant silence. Some delegates leaned forward, curious despite themselves, about what these primitive beings might claim as their unique contribution. We offer, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, the ability to remain silent and observe when survival depends on not revealing the full extent of one's capabilities. Before the implications of her words could fully register, every communication system in the Grand Assembly Hall ceased functioning. The ambient lighting dimmed to emergency levels. The massive holographic displays flickered and went dark. The acoustic enhancement systems fell silent, leaving only the natural acoustics of the vast chamber. More critically, the sophisticated scanning arrays that continuously monitored the chamber for security purposes detected something impossible. The readings showed massive power signatures appearing throughout local space, signatures that had not been present moments before. The passive sensors built into every surface of the Grand Assembly Hall registered energy patterns that defied immediate classification. Outside the chamber, through the crystal walls that offered panoramic views of the surrounding fleet formations, delegate vessels that had been maintaining perfect formation began breaking apart. Not from weapon fire, not from external attack, but from some form of systematic, simultaneous, catastrophic structural failure. The failure patterns were too precise, too coordinated, too perfectly timed to represent accidents or natural phenomena. Someone or something was dismantling the most powerful military fleet in the known galaxy with surgical precision, ship by ship, system by system. As the chamber's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the suddenly silent assembly, Dr. Vasquez remained standing in the center of the circle. Her expression had not changed. Neither had her posture, her breathing, or her apparent emotional state. The demonstration, she said into the profound silence that had fallen over 437 species, has begun. The Grand Assembly Hall, which moments before had been filled with mockery and laughter, now contained only the sound of 437 species, beginning to understand that they had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had assumed that silence meant weakness, that lack of demonstration meant lack of capability, that restraint represented limitation rather than choice. In the growing darkness outside the crystal walls, more ships continued their systematic, peaceful dissolution into component parts. The most powerful fleet ever assembled by galactic civilization was being quietly, efficiently, and completely neutralized by forces that remained invisible to every sensor system the Council possessed. Dr. Vasquez checked her chronometer with the casual gesture of someone confirming a routine appointment time. "We have approximately 47 minutes remaining in our scheduled demonstration period," she announced to the now completely silent chamber. "I believe that should prove sufficient to address your questions about humanity's unique qualifications for Council membership." Ambassador Zexthara's elegant composure cracked as she watched her flagship dissolve through the crystal walls. The massive Vorthan dreadnought, pride of an empire that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia, was coming apart piece by piece in a process so gentle it looked almost beautiful. Hull plates separated cleanly along invisible lines, systems powered down in perfect sequence, and the crew was being transported to smaller vessels with clinical efficiency. No explosions, no violence, no apparent weapons fire. The most feared warship in known space was being disassembled like a complex toy by a patient technician. "This is impossible," whispered Counselor Thranks, his psychic voice barely audible in the minds of nearby delegates. The Hive Collective's bioships were experiencing the same systematic breakdown. Their living hulls were somehow separating at cellular boundaries, while life support systems maintained perfect environmental conditions for the crews during their orderly evacuation. Dr. Vasquez remained in the center of the judgment circle, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that suggested patience rather than aggression. "Counselor Thranks, your species has existed as a collective consciousness for over 23,000 years. In all that time, has the Hive ever encountered a situation where they could not detect the source of a technological phenomenon?" The insectoid delegate's compound eyes fixed on her with sudden focus. "Never," he admitted, his mental voice carrying undercurrents of growing alarm. "Our collective processing power exceeds individual species' capabilities by several orders of magnitude. We can analyze and comprehend any technology within minutes of exposure." "Yet you cannot detect how your ships are being dismantled," Dr. Vasquez observed. "Interesting." Through the chamber's crystal walls, the view showed dozens of delegate vessels in various stages of peaceful deconstruction. The process was so systematic, so completely controlled, that it resembled a carefully choreographed dance rather than an act of aggression. Emergency protocols activated throughout the fleet, but no defensive measures proved effective against an attack they could not locate, identify, or comprehend. War Chief Gorgon of the Siege clans rose from his armored seat, his massive form towering over nearby delegates. "What manner of coward's warfare is this? Show yourselves and fight with honor." General Chen spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "War Chief, your concept of honor involves visible conflict between identifiable opponents. That approach works well when all parties operate under similar technological and tactical frameworks. It becomes less effective when facing opponents who operate outside those frameworks entirely." "Explain yourself, human," Gorgon demanded. "Your species has engaged in stellar warfare for 12,000 years, Chen continued. In that time, you have developed increasingly sophisticated methods of ship-to-ship combat, planetary siege techniques, and fleet coordination protocols. Your military doctrine represents the accumulated tactical knowledge of hundreds of generations of warriors." The war chief nodded proudly. "The siege clans have never been defeated in open battle." "That's because you have never faced an opponent who recognized that open battle represents only one possible approach to conflict resolution," Chen replied. "Your tactical sophistication is impressive within the parameters you have chosen to operate under. However, those parameters themselves may not be universal requirements." Another section of the Siege Clan flagship separated smoothly from the main hull, its crew already relocated to safety before the division occurred. The process continued with mechanical precision, each step executed flawlessly despite the complete absence of detectable intervention. Scholar Prime Nethes of the Academic Consortium activated her species emergency analytical protocols. Crystalline matrices throughout the chamber began processing data at theoretical maximum speeds, attempting to identify the source of the fleet's systematic deconstruction. Her equipment represented the pinnacle of scientific measurement technology, capable of detecting quantum-level fluctuations across multiple dimensional interfaces. After several minutes of intensive analysis, she announced her results with visible frustration. No energy signatures, no particle emissions, no dimensional disruptions, no temporal anomalies, no detectable intervention of any kind, yet the effect continues with perfect consistency. Dr. Morrison spoke up from his seat, his weathered voice carrying the dry tone of someone delivering a routine lecture. Scholar Prime, how long has your species been studying the fundamental forces of the universe? 47,000 years of systematic scientific investigation, Nethes replied proudly. We have mapped the quantum foundations of reality itself. Then you understand that detecting a phenomenon requires appropriate measurement tools and methodologies, Morrison continued. If your instruments cannot identify the source of current events, what does that suggest about the nature of the forces involved? The crystalline being's form shifted through several spectrum ranges as she considered the implications. It suggests that the technology being employed operates through principles we have not yet discovered or understood. Or, Dr. Vasquez interjected gently, it suggests that you have been looking for the wrong things entirely. The ethereal delegation had remained silent throughout the proceedings, their translucent forms shimmering with emotional distress as they watched their artistic masterpiece vessels being carefully dismantled. Their ships were not merely transportation. They were living artworks, expressions of aesthetic beauty refined over centuries. To see them being taken apart, even gently, represented a profound violation of their cultural values. High-resonance Aelin finally spoke, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that expressed deep sorrow. Humans, we have created beauty that has inspired civilizations across the galaxy. Our vessels are not simply ships, they are cultural treasures, irreplaceable expressions of our species' highest artistic achievements. Why do you destroy such beauty? Dr. Vasquez turned toward the ethereal delegation, her expression showing genuine sympathy. High resonance, your vessels are indeed beautiful, and we have taken great care to preserve every component during the disassembly process. Each piece is being cataloged and protected. When this demonstration concludes, your ships will be restored to their exact original configurations, down to the molecular level. Aelin's form brightened slightly. You can restore them perfectly. More perfectly than when they were originally constructed, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. The disassembly process includes detailed scanning at quantum resolution. The reconstruction will eliminate any previous structural wear, material fatigue, or system degradation. Your ships will emerge from this experience in better condition than they entered it. The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber. Restoration at quantum resolution required technological capabilities that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. The precision necessary to disassemble complex vessels without damage, then reconstruct them with improvements, suggested scientific understanding that made current galactic technology appear primitive by comparison. Representative Kylex of the Trade Federation had been calculating economic implications throughout the demonstration. His species approached all situations through the lens of resource management and commercial advantage. Human delegation, the technology you are demonstrating would revolutionize galactic commerce, transportation, and industry. The ability to disassemble and reconstruct complex structures at will would eliminate most current manufacturing limitations. What are your terms for licensing this technology? Dr. Vasquez smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Representative Kylex, you are thinking like a merchant, which I respect. However, you are making the same assumption that has guided this entire discussion. Which assumption? Kylex inquired. You assume that what you are observing represents a technology that operates according to principles your species can understand, replicate, or license, she replied. You are thinking in terms of tools, devices, and systems that can be manufactured, traded, or acquired. The Trade Federation representative's confidence wavered. Are you suggesting this is not a technology? General Chen answered this time. Representative Kylex, when your species first encountered gravitational manipulation, How long did it take to understand and replicate the process? Approximately 800 years from first observation to practical application, Kylix replied. And when you encountered quantum computing, Chen continued. 400 years. Faster due to your accumulated scientific knowledge, Chen noted. Time from first contact to comprehension decreased as your understanding of fundamental principles expanded. You were able to reverse engineer these technologies because they operated according to physical laws you already understood or could learn to understand. Dr. Morrison stood slowly, his elderly frame moving with deliberate care. The demonstration you are observing does not involve technology in any sense that your civilizations would recognize. You are attempting to analyze the effect while ignoring the cause. You are looking for machines, weapons, or devices when you should be asking a different question entirely. The chamber waited in tense silence as more ships continued their orderly deconstruction. The process had now affected over 60% of the assembled fleet, yet it proceeded with the same gentle precision that had characterized it from the beginning. What question should we be asking? Zexthara finally demanded. Dr. Morrison's eyes twinkled with the satisfaction of a teacher whose students had finally asked the right question. You should be asking why a species that possesses these capabilities chose to appear before your council as supplicants requesting membership, rather than simply taking whatever they desired from your civilizations. The silence that followed this statement was absolute. 437 species, representing the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, contemplated the implications of voluntary restraint by beings whose true capabilities they were only beginning to comprehend. Dr. Vasquez checked her chronometer again. 31 minutes remaining in our demonstration period, she announced. Perhaps this would be an appropriate time to discuss the real reason humanity requested council membership. Outside the crystal walls, the systematic deconstruction of the galactic fleet continued with mechanical precision, each separated component drifting in perfect formation, while their crews waited safely in smaller vessels, surrounded by forces they could neither detect nor understand. The Grand Assembly Hall had never experienced such profound silence in its 50,000-year history. Ambassador Zexthara found herself studying the human delegation with entirely different eyes, seeing details she had dismissed as primitive only minutes earlier. Dr. Vasquez's simple blue uniform was not primitive, it was practical, designed for function rather than display. General Chen's rigid posture was not ceremonial, it was the bearing of someone prepared for immediate action. Dr. Morrison's weathered hands did not speak of manual labor. They spoke of decades spent manipulating forces that required personal, physical contact. You said you came to discuss the real reason for humanity's membership request, Zexthara said carefully. We are prepared to listen. Dr. Vasquez nodded and gestured to the continuing deconstruction outside the crystal walls. This demonstration serves a specific purpose beyond proving humanity's capabilities. It illustrates the central problem that brought us to your council. She began walking slowly around the judgment circle, her movement drawing attention from delegates throughout the vast chamber. For the past 50,000 years, galactic civilization has developed along predictable lines. Technological advancement, military expansion, resource exploitation, territorial growth. Your species have competed, cooperated, and occasionally fought wars, but always within a framework of shared assumptions about how the universe operates. The Aquatic Federation's prime speaker rose slightly in her specialized tank. Those assumptions have served galactic civilization well. We have maintained relative peace, shared knowledge, and avoided the kind of catastrophic conflicts that might threaten entire star systems. Indeed, Dr. Vasquez agreed. Your approach has been remarkably successful within its parameters. However, it has also created a dangerous limitation in your collective thinking. Dr. Morrison activated his tablet, and somehow, despite all communication systems in the chamber remaining offline, a holographic display materialized above the judgment circle. The image showed a three-dimensional map of local galactic space, with thousands of civilizations marked in various colors. This represents known galactic civilization as your records document it, Morrison explained. 437 council member species, plus several thousand minor civilizations under various forms of protection or alliance agreements. Impressive in scope and complexity. The display shifted, pulling back to show a broader perspective. The known civilizations now appeared as a small cluster in one section of a much larger structure. This represents the same region from a more complete perspective, Morrison continued. Your civilizations occupy approximately 0.3% of this galaxy. The remaining 99.7% contains phenomena, entities, and civilizations that operate according to principles your current scientific frameworks cannot recognize or measure. A new level of unease spread through the chamber. Scholar Prime Nethes activated her crystalline analysis matrices, attempting to verify the holographic data. "These readings are impossible," she announced. "Our deep space sensors would have detected large-scale civilizations in those regions." "Would they?" Dr. Morrison asked gently. "Your sensors are calibrated to detect technology that operates according to principles you understand, energy signatures you recognize, materials science within your theoretical frameworks, communication systems based on electromagnetic spectrums you utilize." General Chen stepped forward. "Scholar Prime, military doctrine teaches us to prepare for enemies we can identify and understand. But what happens when you face opponents whose capabilities exist outside your detection parameters entirely?" The war chief Gorgon had been growing increasingly agitated as more of his fleet underwent orderly disassembly. "You speak in riddles, human. If these other civilizations exist, why have they not made contact? Why have they not attacked or defended territory? Where is the evidence of their presence?" Dr. Vasquez stopped walking and faced Gorgon directly. "War Chief, they have made contact. Repeatedly. Your civilizations have simply been unable to recognize the contact as such." The holographic display shifted again, focusing on specific star systems within Council space. Each system was marked with temporal indicators showing events that had occurred over the past several millennia. "Examine the pattern," Dr. Vasquez instructed. "Wars that ended suddenly without clear victory conditions. Technological breakthroughs that occurred simultaneously across multiple species without apparent information sharing. Natural disasters that affected only military installations while leaving civilian populations untouched. Resource discoveries that happened at precisely the moments when different civilizations required them to avoid economic collapse." Representative Kylex of the Trade Federation began processing the economic implications. "Those events, we attributed them to coincidence, natural phenomena, or classified intelligence operations. Because those explanations fit within your existing frameworks," Dr. Morrison agreed. "Your civilizations have developed sophisticated tools for understanding and manipulating the physical universe, but you have never developed appropriate tools for recognizing when that universe is being manipulated by others." High-resonance Aelin's form shifted through distressed color patterns. "You are suggesting that our entire history has been influenced by forces we cannot perceive." "Not influenced," Dr. Vasquez corrected. "Guided, protected, shaped when necessary to prevent civilizations from developing in directions that might threaten themselves or others." She gestured to the ongoing fleet deconstruction. "Your military vessels are being disassembled to demonstrate a point. The process is completely reversible and causes no permanent harm. But consider the implications. If humanity can do this to the most powerful fleet ever assembled, what capabilities might other entities possess? And what might they do if they perceived galactic civilization as a threat rather than a curiosity?" Counselor Threnx's collective consciousness processed these revelations across thousands of linked minds. "Are you claiming that humanity serves as some form of intermediary, that you communicate with these other entities?" General Chen answered this question. "Counselor, humanity's unique position in galactic affairs stems from a single biological characteristic that your species evolved away from millions of years ago." "What characteristic?" Threnx demanded. "Uncertainty," Chen replied. "Your civilizations have achieved technological mastery, extended lifespans, and sophisticated social structures by eliminating uncertainty wherever possible. You plan, predict, and control your environment to minimize unknown variables." Dr. Morrison's weathered face showed a slight smile. "Humans never learned to do that effectively. We remained comfortable with uncertainty, with acknowledging the limits of our knowledge, with operating in situations where we could not control or predict outcomes." "That sounds like a limitation, not an advantage," Zexthara observed. "It would be a limitation if your goal were to achieve maximum control over your environment. Dr. Vasquez agreed. But it becomes an advantage when you need to communicate with entities whose nature you cannot fully comprehend, whose capabilities exceed your measurement tools, and whose intentions operate according to logic systems you have never encountered. The implications of this statement resonated through the chamber. Species that had spent millennia perfecting their understanding of the universe were being told that their very expertise made them incapable of recognizing the most important forces operating within that universe. Outside the crystal walls, the fleet deconstruction had reached 80% completion. The process continued with the same gentle precision, but now delegates could see smaller vessels beginning to emerge from apparently empty space. These new ships bore no resemblance to any known design principles, and they moved in patterns that suggested intelligence but followed no recognizable navigation protocols. The entities you cannot detect are beginning to reveal themselves, Dr. Vasquez announced. They have been observing this demonstration with considerable interest. Your reactions have provided them with valuable information about Council species' current development level. Representative Viren of the Shadow Syndicate, whose species specialized in covert operations and intelligence gathering, managed to speak despite his growing alarm. What kind of information? Whether galactic civilization has developed sufficient maturity to be informed of its actual situation, Dr. Vasquez replied. Whether your species can accept the existence of capabilities and entities beyond your current comprehension without responding with fear-based aggression. Scholar Prime Nethes had been conducting increasingly frantic analyses throughout the conversation. My instruments are detecting the new vessels now, but their operational principles defy classification. They appear to exist in quantum states that should be impossible to maintain at macroscopic scales. Dr. Morrison nodded approvingly. You are beginning to see the edges of principles that extend beyond your current scientific framework. That recognition represents progress. The elderly scientist activated another display showing mathematical formulas that hurt to look at directly. These equations describe physical relationships that your civilizations have not yet discovered. They explain how consciousness can directly manipulate quantum probability states, how information can be transmitted instantaneously across arbitrary distances, and how matter can be restructured at the atomic level through focused mental intention. Mental intention, gasped high-resonance Aelin. You suggest that consciousness itself can alter physical reality. Not suggest, Dr. Vasquez corrected, demonstrate. She closed her eyes and extended her right hand toward the nearest section of crystal wall. Without any visible mechanism or device, a small portion of the wall began changing color, shifting from transparent crystal to deep blue, then to gold, then back to transparency. The entities you cannot detect operate primarily through conscious manipulation of quantum probability, she explained, opening her eyes. They can restructure matter, transport objects across space, and modify the fundamental forces of physics through directed mental effort. Your technologies, no matter how advanced, cannot duplicate these capabilities because they are not actually technologies in any sense you would recognize. General Chen checked his own chronometer. 18 minutes remaining in our demonstration period. The external entities are requesting permission to make direct contact with Council representatives. They are curious about your reactions to these revelations. The chamber erupted in confused voices as hundreds of species attempted to process information that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. Some delegates demanded proof, others requested time to analyze the data, and a few began making preparations to evacuate their personnel from what they now perceived as a potentially dangerous situation. Dr. Vasquez raised her hand, and somehow her gesture commanded immediate silence from the entire assembly. Honored counselors, she said, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. Humanity requested membership in your council because we want to serve as interpreters. The entities beyond your detection have been patient with galactic civilization's development, but that patience is not infinite. Recent events have suggested that formal communication may soon become necessary. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces and forms representing 437 different species, all struggling to comprehend their new reality. We are here to help you understand what that communication might involve, and to help you prepare for what comes next. The mysterious vessels outside the Grand Assembly Hall had arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern that hurt to perceive directly. Each ship seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, their forms shifting between configurations that followed no recognizable design principles. Delegates who looked at them too long reported experiencing disorientation and inexplicable emotional responses. Ambassador Zexthara forced herself to focus on the human delegation rather than the impossible sight outside. Dr. Vasquez, you speak of entities that manipulate reality through conscious intention. You demonstrate capabilities that exceed our understanding, but you have not explained what recent events have made formal communication necessary. Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. The answer to that question requires understanding the relationship between technological development and consciousness evolution. May I ask the Council's permission to provide a brief historical summary? Several delegates nodded, though their attention remained divided between the human speakers and the gradually materializing fleet outside. More vessels were becoming visible with each passing minute, their forms suggesting sizes and capabilities that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization's combined arsenals. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez continued. Galactic civilization has followed a predictable development pattern over the past 50,000 years. Individual species achieve spaceflight, encounter other technological civilizations, share knowledge and resources, and gradually integrate into larger governmental and economic structures. Dr. Morrison activated another display, showing a timeline of galactic expansion and technological advancement. This process has produced remarkable achievements. Your civilizations have mastered faster-than-light travel, terraformed thousands of worlds, developed sophisticated artificial intelligence systems, and created weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The timeline showed technological advancement accelerating exponentially, with recent centuries marking dramatic leaps in capability across multiple scientific disciplines. The problem, General Chen interjected, is that your technological advancement has far exceeded your consciousness development. You can build devices that manipulate fundamental forces, but you use them according to motivational frameworks that evolved when your species were limited to single planetary environments. War Chief Gorgon bristled at the implied criticism. Our species have transcended primitive motivations. We cooperate across galactic distances, share resources across species barriers, and maintain peace despite vastly different biological imperatives. With respect, War Chief, Chen replied, your species have expanded primitive motivations to operate on larger scales. Territorial competition now involves star systems instead of continents. Resource acquisition targets entire planets instead of local deposits. Military conflicts threaten multiple worlds instead of single battlefields. The holographic display shifted to show recent Council military actions across the past millennium. Despite the formal peace maintained within Council space, the timeline revealed dozens of conflicts involving non-Council civilizations, resource extraction operations that displaced indigenous populations, and territorial expansion programs that prioritized Council interests over local considerations. Your civilizations remain fundamentally competitive, Dr. Morrison observed. You cooperate effectively when cooperation provides mutual benefit, but you compete destructively when resources or territory become scarce. These patterns are understandable given your evolutionary origins, but they become problematic when combined with weapons capable of sterilizing solar systems. Representative Kylex activated his own analytical systems, reviewing the economic data underlying galactic civilization's expansion patterns. After several minutes of processing, he announced his findings with obvious reluctance. The data suggests that Council expansion has followed economic imperatives that prioritize resource extraction over sustainable development. Our growth rate exceeds the regenerative capacity of exploited systems by significant margins. Which brings us to the recent events that have triggered concern among the entities you cannot detect, Dr. Vasquez said. Your civilizations are approaching critical thresholds in several categories simultaneously. The timeline display updated to show projected development curves extending into the near future. Multiple trend lines converged at concerning intersection points within the next several centuries. Threshold 1, Weapons Technology, Chen announced. Within 200 years, Council civilizations will possess weapons capable of destabilizing stellar fusion processes across multiple star systems simultaneously. These weapons will be deployed not as strategic deterrents, but as practical tools for large-scale resource extraction. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. Scholar Prime Nethes activated her analysis protocols and confirmed the projections after extensive review. "The calculations are correct," she admitted. "Theoretical weapons research in progress across 17 Council civilizations will indeed produce such capabilities within the projected timeframe." Threshold 2. Population expansion, Dr. Morrison continued. "Current growth patterns indicate that Council civilizations will require resources equivalent to approximately 40% of this galaxy's available matter within the next 5,000 years. This expansion rate cannot be sustained through negotiation or voluntary cooperation with non-Council civilizations." Threshold 3. Consciousness development, Dr. Vasquez added. "Despite technological advancement, Council species show no signs of evolving beyond competitive resource acquisition motivations. Advanced weapons combined with primitive consciousness creates what the external entities consider an existential threat to galactic stability." The implications of these projections created visible distress throughout the chamber. Species that had taken pride in their technological achievements were being told that those same achievements represented a growing danger to themselves and others. High-resonance Aelin's form shifted through deep red frequencies, indicating profound alarm. "Are you suggesting that these entities view our civilizations as threats to be eliminated?" "No," Dr. Vasquez replied firmly. "They view your civilizations as children who have found dangerous tools and need guidance before someone gets hurt. The question they face is whether such guidance should be provided through education or intervention." Counselor Threnks leaned forward in his biopod, his collective consciousness processing implications across thousands of linked minds. "What form would such intervention take?" General Chen answered with the blunt directness of someone delivering a military assessment. "Complete technological regression. Every advanced weapon system, faster-than-light drive, and artificial intelligence network would be systematically dismantled. Council civilizations would be restricted to their home systems and prohibited from developing technologies beyond predetermined limits." "That would represent the end of galactic civilization as we know it," Zexthara protested. "It would represent the end of galactic civilization as it currently exists," Dr. Morrison corrected. "But it would ensure that galactic civilization continues to exist in some form rather than destroying itself through uncontrolled expansion and weapon development." The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the prospect of losing everything their species had achieved over millennia of advancement. Outside the crystal walls, more entities were becoming visible, not ships in any recognizable sense, but organized consciousness patterns that moved through space without apparent physical form. "However," Dr. Vasquez continued, "the external entities prefer the educational approach. They would rather help Council civilizations develop appropriate consciousness frameworks than impose technological limitations. That preference is why humanity requested membership in your Council." Representative Viren materialized more clearly than usual, his species' natural stealth capabilities apparently insufficient to remain hidden from whatever forces were observing the chamber. "Explain humanity's role in this educational process." "Humans possess unique qualifications for serving as interpreters between Council civilizations and external entities," Dr. Vasquez replied. "We have developed technologies that operate through consciousness-based principles, but we have not lost the ability to communicate with civilizations that rely purely on mechanical systems." Dr. Morrison stood slowly and walked to the center of the judgment circle. "More importantly, human consciousness retains flexibility that your species evolved away from long ago. We can understand both the mechanical thinking that drives technological development and the consciousness-based thinking that drives reality manipulation. You are asking us to accept guidance from a species that appeared before our Council as primitive supplicants only 1 hour ago," Gorgon growled. "No," General Chen corrected. "We are asking you to accept guidance from entities whose capabilities you are only beginning to comprehend. Humanity simply serves as a translation interface because we can communicate effectively with both sides." The display above the judgment circle shifted to show a new projection, potential development paths for galactic civilization under different guidance scenarios. The educational path showed technological advancement continuing, but channeled toward sustainable development and consciousness evolution. The intervention path showed technological regression, but eventual development along entirely different lines. The choice, Dr. Vasquez announced, belongs to the Council. The external entities will respect whatever decision your civilizations make, but they will also respond appropriately to ensure galactic stability regardless of that decision. Scholar Prime Nethes had been conducting detailed analysis of the consciousness-based technologies humanity had demonstrated. Dr. Morrison, the mathematical principles underlying your capabilities suggest scientific frameworks that extend far beyond our current theoretical models. Would the educational path include sharing such knowledge? Eventually, Morrison replied. But consciousness-based technologies require consciousness development to operate safely. You cannot hand energy weapons to children and expect positive results. Similarly, you cannot provide reality manipulation capabilities to civilizations that have not evolved appropriate ethical and moral frameworks. Zexthara found herself struggling to process the fundamental revision of everything she had believed about galactic affairs. How long would this educational process require? For technological species like yours, Dr. Vasquez said, typically between 5 and 10,000 years to achieve sufficient consciousness development for basic reality manipulation capabilities. Another 10 to 20,000 years to achieve the level of understanding necessary for full independence. 30,000 years of guidance, Kylex calculated. That represents longer than some of our recorded histories. Dr. Morrison nodded understanding. Representative Kylex, your species achieved faster-than-light travel in approximately 4,000 years from the development of written language. You mastered genetic engineering in another 2,000 years. You developed artificial intelligence in another 1,000 years. Consciousness evolution operates on similar timescales but requires different methodologies. General Chen checked his chronometer and looked up at the assembled delegates. 4 minutes remaining in our demonstration period. The external entities are requesting a preliminary response from the Council regarding your preference for educational guidance versus protective intervention. The Grand Assembly Hall, which had contained confident, technologically advanced civilizations only hours earlier, now held 437 species, struggling to comprehend that their entire framework for understanding reality had been fundamentally incomplete. Dr. Vasquez returned to the center of the judgment circle, her calm demeanor unchanged despite the magnitude of the revelations she had delivered. Honored counselors, we await your decision. The final minutes of the demonstration period stretched with unbearable tension, as 437 civilizations faced the most consequential decision in their collective history. Outside the crystal walls, the impossible vessels had formed patterns that suggested vast intelligence networks coordinating across dimensional boundaries that conventional physics declared impossible. Ambassador Zexthara rose from her seat, her elegant form trembling with the magnitude of what she was about to say. Dr. Vasquez, before we respond, I must ask one final question. If the Council chooses educational guidance, what guarantees do we have that humanity and these external entities will not simply become new masters ruling over civilizations they consider primitive? Dr. Vasquez smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Ambassador, that question demonstrates exactly why the educational path remains viable. A species that worries about exchanging one form of domination for another has retained the consciousness flexibility necessary for genuine development. She gestured toward the impossible vessels outside. The external entities do not rule anything. They do not control territory, extract resources, or impose governmental structures. They maintain the underlying stability that allows consciousness to evolve naturally across different evolutionary pathways. Dr. Morrison activated a final holographic display showing the broader galactic structure they had revealed earlier. Think of them as gardeners rather than rulers. They provide appropriate environmental conditions for different species to develop according to their own inherent patterns, but they do not determine what forms that development should take. General Chen stepped forward. More importantly, the educational process is designed to eventually eliminate the need for any external guidance. The goal is consciousness development sufficient for independent operation at cosmic scales. True independence, not the limited independence of technological civilizations operating within narrow parameters. Counselor Threnx's collective consciousness had been processing the implications across thousands of linked minds. General Chen, you mentioned cosmic scales. Are you suggesting that consciousness development eventually transcends planetary or even galactic limitations? I am stating that as fact, Chen replied. The entities you cannot detect operate across multiple galaxies simultaneously. They coordinate consciousness development processes involving billions of species across distances that make galactic civilization appear microscopic by comparison. The chamber absorbed this revelation in stunned silence. Species that had taken pride in their galactic-scale achievements were being told that such achievements represented only the earliest stages of a development process that extended to unimaginable scales. Representative Kylex had been calculating implications with increasing urgency. Dr. Vasquez, if we accept educational guidance, how will it affect Council civilization's immediate operations? Our trade networks, military alliances, territorial agreements? Excellent practical question, Dr. Vasquez replied. Immediate changes would be minimal. Educational guidance operates through subtle adjustments rather than dramatic interventions. Your trade networks would continue operating but would gradually shift toward sustainable rather than extractive practices. Military capabilities would be maintained but would be redirected toward defensive rather than expansionist purposes. The transition would be largely invisible to most citizens of Council civilizations, Dr. Morrison added. Research priorities would shift toward consciousness development alongside technological advancement. Educational systems would include training in consciousness-based capabilities. Gradually, over centuries, your civilizations would develop capabilities that make current technological achievements seem primitive by comparison. War Chief Gorgon had been struggling with concepts that challenged everything his warrior culture valued. Dr. Vasquez, my species has defined itself through military excellence for 15,000 years. Are you saying that such traditions become obsolete? Not obsolete, Dr. Vasquez corrected. Expanded. Military excellence under consciousness-based frameworks involves protecting and nurturing the development of consciousness rather than controlling territory or resources. It represents the difference between conquering enemies and eliminating the conditions that create enemies. General Chen elaborated. War Chief, imagine military operations that could resolve conflicts by helping opposing parties understand their common interests rather than determining which party has superior force. Imagine strategic thinking that operates across timescales where today's enemies might become tomorrow's closest allies through consciousness development rather than conquest. Warfare becomes obsolete when consciousness development reaches levels where all parties recognize their fundamental interconnection, Dr. Morrison explained. But the skills, dedication, and excellence that define military traditions can be redirected toward ensuring that consciousness development occurs safely and successfully. High-Resonance Alan had been contemplating the aesthetic implications throughout the discussion. Dr. Vasquez, would consciousness development enhance or diminish artistic expression? My species' entire identity centers around creating beauty that inspires others. Dr. Vasquez's expression showed deep appreciation. High-resonance, consciousness-based art transcends anything possible through purely technological means. Instead of creating objects that represent beauty, consciousness development eventually allows direct transmission of aesthetic experience. Your species' artistic gifts would not diminish. They would expand to include forms of beauty that cannot currently be conceived or expressed. The demonstration period had officially ended, but the external entities continued maintaining their presence around the Grand Assembly Hall. Their impossible vessels pulsed with patterns that suggested patient waiting rather than threatening presence. Scholar Prime Nethes activated her crystalline matrices one final time, attempting to process everything she had learned. Dr. Morrison, the scientific principles you have described would revolutionize our understanding of physics, biology, and consciousness. Would the educational path include access to such knowledge? Yes, Morrison replied, but in carefully managed stages. Each level of scientific understanding requires corresponding consciousness development to prevent misuse. The sequence is designed to ensure that capabilities and wisdom develop together rather than capabilities outpacing wisdom. Ambassador Zexthara looked around the chamber at representatives from 437 civilizations, all struggling with the same fundamental choice. Honored delegates, we must reach a consensus. The entities that surround us have demonstrated patience beyond anything we could reasonably expect, but they require a response. Representative Virane materialized fully visible for the first time in recorded council history. Dr. Vasquez, if we choose the educational path, is the decision reversible? Can council civilizations change their minds if the process proves unsatisfactory? The educational process can be modified or discontinued at any time, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. However, consciousness development tends to be self-reinforcing. Species that begin evolving beyond purely competitive motivations generally find the process increasingly satisfying and choose to continue. What happens to species that choose to discontinue? Virane pressed. General Chen answered with characteristic directness. They remain at their current development level and are isolated from civilizations that have continued evolving. No punishment, no intervention, simply separation to prevent conflicts between consciousness levels that can no longer communicate effectively. Dr. Morrison added, isolation does not mean abandonment. Educational opportunities remain available, but they are not imposed. Some species prefer to develop independently, which is a valid choice that external entities respect. Zexthara stood and addressed the entire chamber with formal protocol. Honored representatives, I call for a preliminary consensus vote on humanity's membership application and the associated educational guidance proposal. All those in favor of accepting humanity into the Galactic Council and beginning the educational development process, please indicate your position. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species indicated agreement, their votes carrying the weight of civilizations that had come to understand their actual position in a universe far more complex than they had imagined. When the voting concluded, only 17 civilizations out of 437 had abstained, requesting additional time to consider their decision. None had voted against the proposal. Dr. Vasquez bowed formally to the assembled delegates. Honored counselors, on behalf of humanity and our external partners, we accept membership in the Galactic Council and responsibility for facilitating the educational guidance process. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces and forms that had transformed from mocking skeptics to uncertain but hopeful allies within a single hour. The journey ahead will challenge everything you think you know about consciousness, reality, and your civilization's potential. But it will also reveal capabilities and possibilities that exceed your current ability to imagine. Together, we will explore what it truly means to be conscious beings in a universe designed to support the evolution of consciousness itself. Outside the crystal walls, the impossible vessels began to fade back into dimensional states that conventional sensors could not detect. The disassembled Council fleet reassembled itself with perfect precision, every component restored to optimal condition. The Grand Assembly Hall's communication systems came back online. Its holographic displays resumed normal function, and the acoustic enhancement networks returned to full operation. But the delegates who had entered the chamber as representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations departed as students beginning to comprehend their enrollment in a school whose curriculum would reshape their understanding of existence itself. The Council had mocked humanity's apparent limitations and discovered that silence, patience, and humility were not signs of weakness, but evidence of wisdom that transcended anything their technological achievements had prepared them to recognize. As the session officially adjourned, Dr. Vasquez remained in the center of the judgment circle, available to answer the thousands of questions that would emerge as Council civilizations began their transition from technological development to consciousness evolution. The real education was just beginning.